The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the dusty main street of Silverton, Colorado, when Sarah Mitchell stumbled into town, with blood on her dress and terror in her eyes, just moments before the thunder of approaching hooves announced the posse that would seal her fate one way or another. She pressed herself against the weathered boards of the general store, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The year was 1878, and women who ran from their husbands were considered criminals, thieves of a man's property, which in the eyes of the law included herself. Her ribs ached with each breath, and the bruises on her arms throbbed beneath the long sleeves she had pulled down, despite the September heat. She had been running for 3 days, sleeping in barns when she could find them, drinking from streams, eating nothing but the half loaf of bread she had grabbed before fleeing into the night. The sound of horses grew louder. Sarah's heart hammered against her bruised ribs as she looked frantically for somewhere to hide. The town was small, just one main street with a handful of buildings scattered along it. A saloon, the general store, a blacksmith, and what looked like a boarding house. Beyond the town, the Rocky Mountains rose like ancient sentinels, their peaks still capped with last winter's snow despite the summer that had just passed. "There she is!" The shout came from the lead rider, a man Sarah recognized as Sheriff Coleman from Durango, the town she had fled. "Mrs. Mitchell, you need to come with us. Your husband is worried sick about you." Sarah's laugh came out bitter and broken. Worried sick. Thomas Mitchell had worried her sick, all right, worried her until her body was a map of purple and yellow bruises, until her spirit was so broken she could barely remember the girl she had been when she married him 5 years ago at 18 years old. "I am not going back," she called out, her voice steadier than she felt. "I would rather die in these mountains than spend another day in that house." The sheriff dismounted, and 5 other men followed suit. Sarah recognized 2 of them as Thomas's friends from the lumber mill. They all wore the same expression of righteous determination. They believed they were doing the right thing, bringing a wayward wife back to her proper place. "Now, Mrs. Mitchell, let's be reasonable," Sheriff Coleman said, his hand resting on his gun belt. "Your husband says you have been having fits, not thinking clearly. He just wants to take care of you." "He wants to kill me," Sarah said flatly. "Look at me. Really look." She pushed up her sleeves, revealing the finger-shaped bruises that circled her wrists like grotesque bracelets. The men shifted uncomfortably, but their resolve did not waver. A woman's place was with her husband, no matter what. That was the law, written and unwritten. "Madam, we do not get involved in domestic affairs," one of the other men said. "Best you come along peacefully." Sarah took a step backward, then another. Her heel hit the edge of the wooden sidewalk, and she stumbled. Before the men could close the distance, she turned and ran. She ran between the buildings, her boots kicking up dust, her lungs burning. Behind her she heard the men shouting, their heavy footsteps pounding the earth. She ran toward the mountains because there was nowhere else to go, no sanctuary that would take her in, no law that would protect her. The ground began to slope upward as she left the town behind. Pine trees closed in around her, their scent sharp and clean. Branches whipped at her face and dress, but she did not slow down. She could hear the posse behind her, spreading out to cut off her escape routes. "She is crazy, running into the wilderness like that," one man shouted. "She will not last a night." "Good honest husband, and she runs away like a criminal," another voice added. "Women these days have no gratitude." Their words fueled Sarah's desperate flight. She climbed higher, her legs shaking with exhaustion, her vision blurring with tears and sweat. The sun was sinking toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Soon it would be dark, and she would be alone in the mountains with no food, no shelter, and no idea how to survive. But still, she ran. The ground grew steeper, rockier. Sarah's dress caught on a bramble and tore with a sound that seemed impossibly loud. She yanked it free and kept going, her hands grabbing at tree trunks and rocks to pull herself upward. The voices behind her were getting fainter, but she did not dare stop. Darkness fell quickly in the mountains. One moment the sky was light, and the next, shadows swallowed everything. Sarah's foot caught on a root she could not see, and she went down hard, her palms scraping against rough stone. She lay there for a moment, gasping, listening for the sounds of pursuit. Nothing. Just the whisper of wind through pine needles and the distant call of an owl. Sarah pushed herself up to her knees, then to her feet, Every muscle in her body screamed in protest. She had no idea where she was or which direction to go. The temperature was dropping rapidly, and her thin dress and torn shawl were no match for the mountain night. She stumbled forward, one hand outstretched to keep from walking into trees. Her teeth began to chatter. She knew about exposure, had heard stories of people freezing to death in these mountains even in summer. But what choice did she have? She could not go back. Death in the wilderness was preferable to the slow murder Thomas had been inflicting on her for years. A light flickered in the distance. Sarah froze, her heart leaping into her throat. Was it the posse? Had they circled around ahead of her? But no, the light was stationary, a warm, golden glow that spoke of a lamp or fire. She moved toward it, caution warring with desperate hope. As she drew closer, she made out the shape of a cabin, solid and dark against the night sky. Smoke rose from a stone chimney. Someone lived here, alone in the wilderness. Sarah approached slowly, every instinct telling her to be careful. The cabin was well built, with a covered porch and windows that glowed with lamplight. Firewood was stacked neatly against one wall, and she could see the outline of a shed or stable behind the main building. She climbed the 3 steps to the porch, her hand raised to knock, when the door swung open. The man who stood there was the largest human being Sarah had ever seen. He stood well over 6 feet tall, with shoulders so broad they nearly filled the doorway. His arms were thick with muscle, visible beneath the rolled sleeves of his flannel shirt. His hair was dark and fell past his shoulders, tied back with a leather cord. His face was all hard angles, sharp cheekbones, and a strong jaw covered with several days' worth of beard. His eyes, pale blue in the lamplight, studied her with an intensity that made her want to step backward. "I am sorry," Sarah stammered. "I did not mean to intrude. I was just—" "You are hurt," the man said. His voice was deep, rough from disuse, but not unkind. His eyes had moved from her face to take in her torn dress, her scraped hands, the way she was trembling. "I am fine," Sarah lied automatically, the way she had learned to lie over 5 years of marriage. "I just need directions back to town." "You are lying," the man said flatly. "And you did not come up here looking for directions. You came running away from something." His eyes narrowed. Or someone. Sarah's carefully constructed composure crumbled. To her horror, she felt tears spilling down her cheeks. "Please," she whispered, "they are looking for me. The sheriff and a posse. They want to take me back to my husband. Please, I cannot go back. I cannot." The man was silent for a long moment, his pale eyes searching her face. Then he stepped back, opening the door wider. "Come inside," he said. "You are freezing." Sarah hesitated. She did not know this man. He could be dangerous, could turn her over to the sheriff for a reward. But the cold was seeping into her bones, and she could still hear Thomas's voice in her head, promising he would find her, promising she would never escape him. She stepped inside. The cabin's interior was surprisingly clean and well-ordered. A fire burned in a large stone fireplace, filling the single room with warmth. There was a table with 2 chairs, a bed covered with thick furs in one corner, shelves lined with supplies and tools, and a small kitchen area with a cast-iron stove. The smell of something cooking made Sarah's empty stomach clench painfully. "Sit," the man said, gesturing to one of the chairs. "You look like you're going to fall over." Sarah sank into the chair gratefully. Now that she had stopped moving, the full extent of her exhaustion hit her like a physical blow. Her legs felt like water, and her hands would not stop shaking. The man moved to the stove and ladled something from a pot into a bowl. He set it in front of her along with a spoon and a chunk of bread. "Venison stew," he said. "Eat slowly or you will make yourself sick." Sarah stared at the food, then at the man. "Why are you helping me?" He pulled out the other chair and sat down, his large frame making the furniture look small. "Because you need help," he said simply, "and because I saw the bruises on your arms when you raised your hand to knock." Shame flooded through Sarah. She pulled her sleeves down again, covering the marks. "You do not understand. The law says I have to go back. I am his wife." "The law is not always right," the man said. His voice was hard, edged with something that sounded like old anger. "Eat. Then you can tell me your story if you want to. Or not. Either way, you are safe here tonight." Sarah picked up the spoon with trembling hands and took a small bite of the stew. The rich, savory flavors exploded on her tongue, and she had to force herself to follow the man's advice and eat slowly. She had not realized how hungry she was until this moment. The man did not speak while she ate, just sat watching the fire, his profile sharp and still as carved stone. Now that she had a chance to look at him properly, Sarah could see old scars on his hands and forearms, the kind that came from hard physical labor and survival in the wilderness. His clothes were worn but clean, his boots well made and carefully maintained. When she had finished the stew and bread, he took the bowl and refilled it without asking. Sarah accepted it with murmured thanks and ate more slowly this time, savoring each bite. "My name is Sarah," she said finally. "Sarah Mitchell." The man nodded. "Caleb. Caleb Thorne. You live up here alone?" "Yes." "By choice?" "Yes." Sarah waited, but he did not elaborate. She finished the second bowl of stew and set it down, feeling warm for the first time in days. "They will come looking for me," she said quietly. "The posse. When it gets light, they will search the mountains." "Let them search," Caleb said. "These mountains are my home. I know every trail, every canyon, every place a person could hide. They will not find you unless I want them to." "You would hide me? Even though it is against the law?" Caleb's pale eyes fixed on her, and Sarah saw something fierce and protective in their depths. "I told you, the law is not always right. A man who puts those kinds of bruises on his wife is not a good, honest husband, no matter what a posse might shout." Sarah felt something crack open inside her chest, some place that had been locked tight for years. This stranger, this mountain man she had known for less than an hour, saw her, really saw her. Not as property, not as a wayward wife who needed to be returned to her rightful owner, but as a person who deserved protection. "Thank you," she whispered, and the words carried the weight of 5 years of suffering. Caleb stood and moved to a chest against the wall. He pulled out several thick blankets and a fur. "You take the bed," he said. "I will sleep by the fire." "I cannot take your bed," Sarah protested. "You have already done so much." "You are injured and exhausted," Caleb said firmly. "You need proper rest. I have slept in worse places than in front of a warm fire." Sarah was too tired to argue further. She moved to the bed and sank down onto it, the softness of the furs beneath her feeling like the greatest luxury in the world. Caleb banked the fire and spread his blankets on the floor. He extinguished the lamp, plunging the cabin into darkness except for the soft glow from the fireplace. "Sarah," his voice came from the darkness, "you are safe here. Sleep." And despite everything, despite being in a stranger's cabin in the middle of the wilderness with a posse hunting her, Sarah felt safe. She closed her eyes and let sleep claim her. She woke to the smell of coffee and frying bacon. Sunlight streamed through the cabin windows, and for a moment, Sarah could not remember where she was. Then, memory returned in a rush, and she sat up quickly, her heart pounding. Caleb stood at the stove, his back to her. "There is water in the basin if you want to wash," he said without turning around, "and I put out some clean clothes for you. They will be too big, but better than what you are wearing." Sarah looked down and saw a folded shirt and pants on the chair beside the bed. Her torn and dirty dress was a stark reminder of her flight through the forest. "I cannot wear men's clothing," she said automatically. "Why not?" Caleb turned to look at her, one eyebrow raised. "You planning to climb through these mountains in that dress? Because if the posse comes and we need to move quickly, you will not get far in skirts." He had a point. Sarah took the clothes and looked around for somewhere to change. "I will step outside," Caleb said, reading her hesitation. "Give you some privacy." He went out the door, closing it behind him. Sarah quickly stripped off her ruined dress and undergarments, wincing as the fabric pulled at her bruises. She washed as best she could with the cold water in the basin, then put on the shirt and pants. They were indeed too large, but she rolled up the sleeves and cuffs and cinched the pants tight with her own belt. The freedom of movement was startling. She had not worn anything but long dresses since she was a child. "You can come in," she called. Caleb entered carrying an armload of firewood. His eyes swept over her, and something that might have been approval flickered across his face. "Better," he said. "Now come eat." They ate in companionable silence, bacon and cornbread with strong black coffee. Sarah had not realized how much she missed simple things like hot food and coffee until this moment. "Did you hear anything last night?" she asked finally. "The posse?" "They made camp about 2 miles south of here," Caleb said. "I could see their fire. They will start searching at first light, which was about an hour ago. They will likely check with me since I am the only one living up this way." Sarah's hand froze halfway to her mouth. "They will search the cabin." "Probably. Then I need to leave. I cannot let them find me here. I will not let you get in trouble for helping me." Caleb shook his head. "You're not going anywhere. I have a place where you can hide. They can search all they want. They will not find anything." He stood and walked to the far corner of the cabin, where a large bearskin rug lay on the floor. He pulled it aside, revealing a trap door cut seamlessly into the wooden planks. "Root cellar," he explained, lifting the door. "I dug it myself when I built this cabin. Keeps food cold in summer from freezing in winter. It is also completely hidden from above." Sarah moved to look down into the opening. A ladder led down into darkness. "How deep is it?" "About 8 feet. There's plenty of headroom once you get down there. I will give you a blanket and a lamp. If you hear voices, extinguish the lamp immediately. The opening is fitted so tight that no light will show through, but best not to take chances." The sound of horses came from somewhere down the mountain. Caleb's head snapped up. "They are coming. Get down there, now." Sarah did not hesitate. She climbed down the ladder quickly, and Caleb handed her a blanket and a small oil lamp before lowering the door. She heard the scrape of the bearskin being dragged back into place, then his footsteps moving away. The cellar was dark and cool, smelling of earth and stored vegetables. Sarah felt her way to the wall and sat down, wrapping the blanket around herself. Her heart hammered so loudly she was sure anyone above would be able to hear it. Footsteps on the porch, a heavy knock on the door. "Thorne! Caleb Thorne! Open up!" That was Sheriff Coleman's voice. The sound of the door opening. "Sheriff," Caleb's voice was calm, unhurried. "What brings you up the mountain?" "We are looking for a woman, Sarah Mitchell. She ran away from her husband down in Durango, headed into these mountains yesterday. You seen anyone?" "No." "You're sure?" "Young woman, brown hair, wearing a blue dress." "I've been alone up here for 2 weeks, Sheriff. I've not seen anyone except you and your men. You mind if we search the cabin?" There was a pause. "You have a warrant?" "Now, Thorne, do not make this difficult. We are just trying to help a woman who is not in her right mind. Her husband says she has fits, might hurt herself or someone else. Then you will need a warrant to search my property." Caleb's voice was still calm, but Sarah heard the steel underneath. "I know my rights, Sheriff." "The law says a man has a right to recover his property," another voice interjected. "That includes his wife." "The law also says a man's home is his castle," Caleb replied. "And you are standing in mine without permission. I have said I have not seen anyone. You can choose to believe me or not, but you are not searching this cabin without proper legal authority." The silence stretched out. Sarah held her breath, her fingernails digging into her palms. "Fine," Sheriff Coleman said finally. "But if we find out you are harboring her, Thorne, you will be charged as an accessory. You understand that?" "I understand you are threatening me on my own property," Caleb said. "Now, unless you have other business, I have work to do." More silence, then footsteps, moving away. The door closed. Sarah waited in the darkness, not daring to move. It seemed like hours before she heard the scrape of the bearskin being moved and the trapdoor lifted. "They are gone," Caleb said, reaching down to help her up the ladder. "They are going to search the surrounding area, but they will not be back here." Sarah climbed out, her legs shaky. "You could have let them search. You could have given me up. Why did you not?" Caleb looked at her, and the intensity in his pale blue eyes made her breath catch. "Because a man who beats his wife is no husband at all, and because you have the look of someone who would rather die than go back. I have seen that look before." "Where?" Sarah asked softly. Caleb turned away, his jaw tight. "My mother," he said finally. "She had that look. My father was a drunk and a mean one. He used her as a punching bag whenever the whiskey got to him. When I was 16, he went too far. Beat her so bad she could not get out of bed. I was hunting that day, came home to find her dead." His hands clenched into fists. "I tracked my father to the saloon in town, would have killed him with my bare hands if the sheriff had not stopped me." My father died in a bar fight 6 months later, and I left civilization behind. Been up here ever since." Sarah felt tears sting her eyes. "How long ago was that?" 12 years. So you were 16. That makes you 28 now." Caleb nodded. Sarah was 23. 5 years of marriage had aged her, but she was still young. Sometimes she forgot that. "I'm sorry about your mother," she said. "I am sorry about your husband," Caleb replied, "but you got away, and I will make sure you stay away." Over the next several days, Sarah slowly began to heal. Her bruises faded from purple to yellow to green. Her scraped hands formed scabs that eventually fell away, leaving pink new skin. Caleb was a quiet companion, speaking little but showing her how to survive in the mountains. He taught her to identify edible plants, to read animal tracks, to move quietly through the forest. He showed her his trapline and how to skin a rabbit, practical skills she never would have learned as a town wife. Sarah found herself watching him as he worked. There was a grace to his movements despite his size, a confidence that came from years of living in harmony with the wilderness. His hands, so large and scarred, were surprisingly gentle when he handled the small animals he trapped or when he showed her how to hold a knife properly. She also found herself noticing other things, the way his hair fell forward when he bent over a task, the flex of muscle in his forearms when he chopped wood, the rare smile that softened his stern features when she did something that pleased him. One evening, as they sat by the fire after supper, Sarah asked, "Have you really been alone up here for 12 years?" Caleb fed another log to the flames. "Mostly. I go into town twice a year for supplies, trade furs and meat for what I cannot make or grow myself, but I do not stay long. Towns make me nervous, too many people, too much noise." "Do you not get lonely?" He was quiet for a long time. "Sometimes," he admitted, "but loneliness is better than the alternative. People hurt each other. Out here, the only things I have to worry about are predators, weather, and my own stupidity." "Not all people hurt each other," Sarah said softly. Caleb's eyes met hers across the fire. "Your husband hurt you. My father hurt my mother. Seems like people hurt the ones they claim to love most of all." "Love should not hurt," Sarah said. "What Thomas did, that was not love. I do not think he ever loved me. He married me because I was young, and he thought I would be easy to control. And I married him because my parents said he was a good match. He had a steady job, a house, prospects. They did not care that he was 15 years older than me or that he looked at me like I was something he wanted to own." "How long before he started hitting you?" Sarah wrapped her arms around herself. 3 months. The first time was a slap, and he cried afterward, said he was sorry, that it would never happen again. I believed him. The second time was worse, then worse again. By the end of the first year, I was covered in bruises so often I could not remember what my skin looked like without them. "Why did you not leave sooner?" "Where would I go? My parents would just send me back. The law would send me back. Everyone in town thought Thomas was such a fine, upstanding man. When I tried to tell the doctor about the bruises, he said I should try harder to be a good wife, that maybe I was provoking my husband. So I stopped trying to tell anyone. I just endured." "What changed?" Sarah was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "He said he wanted children. I had been taking herbs to prevent it. I knew I could not bring a child into that house, could not risk a baby being hurt too. When he found the herbs, he beat me worse than ever before. Told me he would get me pregnant whether I wanted it or not. That night, after he fell asleep, I ran. I did not plan it, did not take anything except the clothes on my back and some bread from the kitchen. I just ran." Caleb's jaw was tight, his hands clenched on his knees. "If your husband shows up here, I will not be responsible for what I do to him." The fierce protectiveness in his voice made Sarah's heart skip. "You have already done so much for me. I do not want you to get in trouble on my account." "I have been in trouble before," Caleb said. "I can handle it." The days turned into weeks. The posse had given up searching the mountains and returned to Durango. Caleb had gone down to Silverton for supplies and came back with news that Thomas Mitchell was offering a reward for information leading to his wife's return, claiming she had stolen from him and was mentally unstable. The town is split, Caleb reported. Half think you are a criminal who needs to be brought to justice. The other half is whispering about why a woman would run from a good husband. A few of the women are saying they had suspicions about Thomas for years. Sarah felt a flicker of hope. Do you think anyone would believe my side of the story? Caleb shook his head. Not enough to matter. The law is still on his side. As long as you are married to him, you are his property in the eyes of the court. Then I can never go back to civilization, Sarah said. The thought should have terrified her, but instead, she felt a strange sense of peace. I will have to stay hidden forever. Would that be so terrible? Caleb asked quietly. Staying here? Their eyes met, and Sarah felt something shift between them. Over the past weeks, they had fallen into an easy partnership. She cooked and mended while he hunted and tended the trapline. They talked in the evenings by the fire, sharing stories of their pasts, their dreams, their fears. Sarah found herself thinking about him constantly, noticing the way his rare smiles made her heart race, the way his presence made her feel safe in a way she had never felt with Thomas. No, she said softly. It would not be terrible at all. Autumn came to the mountains in a blaze of gold and crimson. The air grew colder, and Caleb began preparing for winter in earnest. He cut and stacked wood until there was a massive pile against the cabin wall. He smoked and dried meat, stored root vegetables in the cellar, checked and rechecked his supplies. Sarah helped with everything, learning skills she never would have imagined needing. She learned to shoot, though the kick of the rifle bruised her shoulder. She learned to preserve food, to sew buckskin, to predict weather by watching the sky and the behavior of animals. She also learned to be herself again. The frightened, beaten woman who had stumbled into Caleb's cabin was slowly being replaced by someone stronger. Her laughter came more easily now. She slept without nightmares. The constant tension that had defined her married life was gone. One crisp October morning, Sarah was gathering pine nuts when she heard a sound that made her freeze. Horses, multiple horses coming up the mountain. She dropped her basket and ran back to the cabin. Caleb was outside splitting wood, and he straightened when he saw her face. Someone is coming, she gasped. Caleb listened for a moment, then nodded grimly. Get inside. Hide in the cellar. Do not come out until I tell you it is safe. Sarah did not argue. She ran inside and climbed down into the cellar, pulling the trapdoor closed above her. In the darkness, she heard the sounds of horses arriving, men's voices. Thorn! That was a voice she recognized, and her blood ran cold. Thomas. Her husband had come to the mountains himself. Mitchell. Caleb's voice was flat, emotionless. What do you want? You know what I want. My wife. I know she is here. Where else would she have gone? I told the sheriff weeks ago, I have not seen your wife. You are a liar. Thomas's voice was hard with anger. I have been asking around about you. People say you are a hermit, that you hate civilization. Where better for a runaway wife to hide than with a man who lives outside the law? Outside the law is not the same as breaking the law, Caleb replied, and I do not take kindly to being called a liar on my own property. Search the cabin, Thomas ordered, and Sarah heard multiple sets of footsteps crossing the porch. You have no right, Caleb said, his voice sharp. This is my land. Get off it. I have every right to search for my wife, Thomas shot back. She is my property by law. Any man who hides her is guilty of theft. Sarah heard the cabin door bang open, heard boots on the wooden floor above her head. Her heart pounded so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. They were searching, opening cabinets, overturning furniture. She heard something break, heard Thomas cursing. She is not here, one of the men said finally. Check again, Thomas snapped. Look for trapdoors, hiding places. She has to be here. More footsteps. Someone walked directly over the cellar, and Sarah held her breath. The bearskin rug was so perfectly placed, the trapdoor so seamlessly built, that no one would notice unless they knew exactly what to look for. There is nothing here, Thomas, the man said. Let it go. Maybe she did not come this way after all. She is here somewhere, Thomas said, but his voice had lost some of its certainty. I can feel it. That's enough, Caleb's voice cut through the others. You have searched my cabin without permission. You have damaged my property. Now get off my land before I make you leave." "You threatening me?" Thomas asked, and Sarah heard the sneer in his voice. "I am stating a fact. You have 10 seconds to mount your horse and ride away." "I will kill her when I find her," Thomas said, loud enough for his voice to carry. "I will make sure she regrets every second she was gone. And you, Thorne, if I find out you helped her, I will see you hang." No one responded. After a long moment, Sarah heard boots retreating, horses moving away. Still, she did not move. She waited in the darkness, counting her heartbeats, until finally the trapdoor lifted. Caleb's face appeared, backlit by lamplight. "They are gone." Sarah climbed out on shaking legs. The cabin was a mess. The table was overturned, supplies scattered across the floor, one of the chairs broken. But they had not found the cellar. "I am sorry," Sarah whispered. "I am so sorry. I should leave. I am putting you in danger." "You are not going anywhere," Caleb said firmly. He reached out and took her shoulders gently, careful of the bruises that had finally healed. "Do you hear me, Sarah? You are not going back to that man. I would rather face every lawman in Colorado than let him touch you again." Sarah looked up at him, this fierce, protective mountain man who had saved her life. "Why?" she asked. "Why would you risk so much for me?" Caleb's pale blue eyes held hers. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, slowly, carefully, as if she might bolt like a frightened deer, he cupped her face in his large, scarred hands. "Because I love you," he said simply. "I think I have loved you since the moment you stumbled onto my porch, terrified and hurting, but still fighting. You are the bravest person I have ever met, Sarah Mitchell. And if you will have me, I want you to stay here, not as someone hiding from her past, but as my future." Sarah's breath caught. "Caleb, I am still married. The law says—" "The law is wrong," Caleb said. "In my eyes, in God's eyes, a marriage made under force and violence is not a marriage at all. I do not care what some judge says. I know what I feel. I know what I see when I look at you." Tears spilled down Sarah's cheeks. "I love you too," she whispered. "I think I have for weeks. But I was afraid to say it, afraid to hope that someone like you could love someone like me." "Someone like you," Caleb repeated softly. "You mean someone strong and beautiful and brave? Someone who survived hell and came out the other side?" "Yes, Sarah. I love someone exactly like that." He bent his head, and Sarah rose on her toes to meet him. Their lips met in a kiss that was gentle and sweet and full of promise. Caleb's arms came around her, careful and protective, and Sarah melted into his embrace. For the first time in 5 years, she felt truly safe. More than safe. She felt cherished. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. Caleb rested his forehead against hers. "I cannot give you a fancy house in town," he said. "I cannot give you parties or new dresses or any of the things other women have. But I can give you this cabin, these mountains, and a life where you never have to be afraid again. I can promise you I will never raise my hand to you in anger, never try to control you, never hurt you. I will protect you with everything I have, and I will love you for as long as I draw breath." Sarah smiled through her tears. "That is all I have ever wanted. Not fancy things or social status. Just someone who sees me, really sees me, and loves me anyway. You have already given me more than I ever dreamed possible." They spent the rest of the evening setting the cabin to rights and talking about the future. Winter was coming, and they would be snowed in for months. It would be just the two of them, alone in the wilderness, and the thought filled Sarah with joy rather than fear. As autumn deepened into winter, their love deepened too. They fell into a rhythm that felt as natural as breathing. Sarah would wake to find Caleb already up, stoking the fire and putting on coffee. They would eat breakfast together, then split up to handle the day's chores. Caleb would check the trapline or hunt while Sarah tended the cabin, mended clothes, and prepared food. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire, talking and laughing, and Caleb would pull Sarah into his lap and kiss her until they were both breathless. The physical intimacy grew slowly, carefully. Caleb was patient, letting Sarah set the pace, never pushing for more than she was ready to give. He seemed to understand instinctively that Thomas had made her afraid of a man's touch, that she needed time to learn the difference between violence and love. One night in early November, as the first heavy snow began to fall, Sarah took Caleb's hand and led him to the bed. She looked up at him, her heart in her eyes. "I am ready," she said softly. "I want this. I want you." Caleb searched her face. "Are you sure?" "I have never been more sure of anything." He kissed her then, deep and slow, and Sarah felt heat bloom through her body. Caleb's hands were gentle as he unlaced her shirt, his touch reverent as he traced the faded bruises that were now barely visible. He kissed each mark, as if he could erase the memory of pain with tenderness. They came together in the firelight, and it was nothing like what Sarah had experienced with Thomas. There was no force, no pain, no sense of duty or obligation. There was only love and connection and the overwhelming feeling of being cherished. Caleb held her as if she were something precious, moved with her as if they were dancing, and when they finally crested together, Sarah felt tears streaming down her face. "I love you," she whispered against his chest afterward. "I love you so much." "I love you too," Caleb murmured into her hair. "My Sarah, my brave, beautiful Sarah." The winter passed in a cocoon of snow and love. They were completely isolated, cut off from the world below, and it was perfect. They talked for hours about everything and nothing. They made love by firelight and woke wrapped in each other's arms. They worked side by side on small projects, making the cabin more comfortable, crafting gifts for each other from leather and wood and bone. Sarah taught Caleb to read better. He had learned the basics as a child, but had little practice in the years since. They read together from the few books he owned, and Sarah loved watching his face light up as stories unfolded. Caleb taught Sarah to track animals in the snow, to predict avalanche conditions, to survive in the harshest environment imaginable. But more than that, he taught her that she was worth loving, that her opinions mattered, that she was strong and capable. One evening in December, as they sat by the fire, Sarah said, "I wish we could really be married. Not in the eyes of the law, maybe, but in God's eyes. In our own eyes." Caleb took her hand. "Then let's do it. Right here, right now. We do not need a preacher to tell us what we already know in our hearts." They stood facing each other in front of the fire. Caleb took both of Sarah's hands in his. "I, Caleb Thorne, take you, Sarah, to be my wife," he said, his voice solemn. "I promise to love you, protect you, and cherish you for all the days of my life. I promise to be your partner, your friend, and your shelter in any storm. I will never raise my hand to you in anger. I will never make you feel small or afraid. I will spend every day showing you what real love looks like." Sarah's voice shook with emotion as she spoke. "I, Sarah, take you, Caleb Thorne, to be my husband. I promise to love you, stand beside you, and honor you for all the days of my life. I promise to be your partner, your companion, and your home wherever we are. I will trust you, believe in you, and build a life with you that is based on respect and love." Caleb pulled a leather cord from his pocket. Threaded on it was a small silver ring, simple and unadorned. "This was my mother's wedding ring," he said quietly. "It is the only thing of hers I have. I want you to have it." He slipped it onto Sarah's finger, and she closed her hand around it, feeling the weight of the promise it represented. "I do not have anything to give you," she said. Caleb smiled and pulled her close. "You already gave me everything. You gave me a reason to care about tomorrow. You brought life and light into this cabin. You made me remember what it feels like to hope." They sealed their vows with a kiss, and in that moment, Sarah knew that no matter what the law said, no matter what anyone else thought, she was truly married. Married to a man who would never hurt her, who saw her strength instead of her weakness, who loved her not for what she could give him, but for who she was. The winter months were the happiest of Sarah's life. She and Caleb fell deeper in love with each passing day. They learned each other's rhythms, preferences, quirks. Sarah learned that Caleb sang softly while he worked, old songs his mother had taught him. Caleb learned that Sarah talked in her sleep and had a terrible habit of stealing all the blankets. In February, Sarah realized she had not had her monthly courses in some time. At first she thought it was just stress or the change in her diet, but as the weeks passed and her body began to change in subtle ways, she knew the truth. She was pregnant. The realization filled her with equal parts joy and terror. Joy because this was Caleb's child, created in love rather than violence. Terror because she remembered Thomas's anger when he found her herbs, his determination to get her pregnant by force. She told Caleb one evening after supper, her hands shaking as she took his. "I need to tell you something. I'm going to have a baby." Caleb froze. For a long moment he said nothing, and Sarah felt fear rise in her throat. What if he did not want children? What if this changed everything? Then a slow, wondering smile spread across his face. "A baby? Truly?" "Yes, I think I'm about 2 months along." Caleb let out a whoop of joy and picked Sarah up, spinning her around before carefully setting her back down. "We're going to have a baby! Sarah, that is wonderful!" Then his face grew serious. "How do you feel about it? After what happened with Thomas, I mean. Are you all right with this?" Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. Of course he would ask that. Of course he would care about her feelings rather than just his own wants. "I am happy," she said honestly. "With you, I am happy. This baby will be born from love, not violence. That makes all the difference." Caleb placed his large hand gently on her still flat stomach. "I am going to be a father," he said wonderingly. "I promise you, little one, I will be nothing like my father. I will protect you and love you and teach you to be strong and kind." Spring came late to the mountains, but when it finally arrived, it was glorious. The snow melted in rushing torrents, wildflowers blanketed the meadows, and the world came alive with color and sound. Sarah's pregnancy became more obvious. Her body rounded, her belly swelling with new life. Caleb was attentive to the point of being overprotective. He tried to do all the heavy chores himself, fussing over Sarah's diet and rest. Sarah found it both endearing and exasperating. "I am pregnant, not made of glass," she told him one day when he tried to stop her from carrying water from the stream. "I need to stay active." "I know," Caleb said. "I just worry. What if something happens? I have no experience with birthing babies. If there are complications, we are too far from any doctor or midwife." It was a valid concern, and one that Sarah had been thinking about too. "We should go down to Silverton before I get too far along," she said. "Find a midwife, someone who can teach you what to do when the time comes. And risk Thomas finding you." "He thinks I am dead by now," Sarah said. "He searched all winter and found nothing, and I look different now. I am healthier, my hair's longer, and I will be wearing men's clothes. No one will recognize me." Caleb was not convinced, but he agreed they needed help. In early May, when Sarah was about 5 months along, they made the trip down to Silverton. Sarah wore Caleb's spare clothes and a wide-brimmed hat pulled low over her face. They arrived in town in the late afternoon, when most people were busy with their own affairs. Caleb led her directly to a small house on the edge of town, where an older woman named Mrs. Brennan lived. She was known as the best midwife in the territory. Mrs. Brennan was a no-nonsense woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and gentle hands. She examined Sarah carefully, asked dozens of questions, and finally pronounced that both mother and baby seemed healthy. "When are you due?" she asked. "Late September, I think," Sarah said. "And you are planning to give birth up in the mountains with no help but your husband?" "We have no choice," Sarah said quietly. "There are reasons I cannot stay in town." Mrs. Brennan's eyes narrowed. "You are in some kind of trouble, are you not? Running from something?" Sarah and Caleb exchanged glances. Finally, Caleb said, "Her husband was not a good man. He hurt her. She ran away, and we fell in love. We are married in all the ways that matter, but not in the eyes of the law. Her legal husband is still looking for her." Mrs. Brennan was quiet for a long moment, then she nodded. "I thought I recognized you. You are Sarah Mitchell, are you not? Thomas Mitchell's wife?" Sarah's breath caught. "Please, you cannot tell anyone. He will kill me if he finds me." "Calm down, child," Mrs. Brennan said. "I have been a midwife for 40 years. I have seen what men like Thomas Mitchell do to their wives. I have patched up too many women who walked into doors or fell down stairs." Her voice turned hard. "I'm not going to help that monster find you." Relief flooded through Sarah. "Thank you. But you cannot give birth up there alone," Mrs. Brennan continued. "Anything could go wrong. The baby could be breech, you could hemorrhage, a dozen other complications. You need someone who knows what they are doing." "We cannot risk coming back to town when the time comes," Caleb said. "It is too dangerous." Mrs. Brennan considered this. "Then I will come to you. When you think it is getting close, send word. I will pack my supplies and come up the mountain. I have delivered babies in worse places than a mountain cabin, I assure you." "You would do that for us?" Sarah asked, amazed. "I took an oath to help bring babies safely into this world," Mrs. Brennan said firmly. "I do not care what the law says about who you are married to. I care about making sure you and your child survive. Now, let me teach your husband everything he needs to know in case the baby comes before I can get there." They spent several hours with Mrs. Brennan, learning about the stages of labor, what to expect, what could go wrong, and how to handle it. Caleb listened intently, asking questions, committing everything to memory. Mrs. Brennan gave them supplies, clean cloth, herbs to help with pain and prevent infection. As they were leaving, Mrs. Brennan caught Sarah's hand. "You know, there are ways to end a marriage besides death. You could petition for divorce on grounds of cruelty." Sarah shook her head. "No judge would grant it. Women do not get divorces, and even if they did, Thomas would fight it. He would find me, and he would kill me rather than let me go." "Things are changing," Mrs. Brennan said, slowly, "but they are changing. Someday, women like you will have real recourse, but until then, you stay hidden, you stay safe, and you send for me when that baby decides to come." They left town without incident and made their way back up the mountain. Sarah felt lighter despite the added weight of pregnancy. They had help now, someone who knew what they were facing and was willing to support them. The summer passed in peaceful contentment. Sarah's belly grew round and full. The baby kicked and moved inside her, and she would place Caleb's hand on her stomach so he could feel it too. The look of wonder on his face every time never failed to make her smile. Caleb prepared for the birth with the same thoroughness he brought to everything. He gathered extra wood, stocked the cabin with supplies, and made sure they had everything Mrs. Brennan had recommended. He built a cradle from smooth pine, sanding it until there was not a single rough edge. In early September, Sarah woke one morning to a familiar ache in her back. She did not say anything to Caleb at first, not wanting to alarm him if it was nothing. But as the day wore on, the ache intensified, and she began to feel irregular tightening across her belly. By evening, she knew. The baby was coming. "Caleb," she said quietly as they were eating supper, "you need to go get Mrs. Brennan." His head snapped up. "Now? Are you sure?" "Yes, the pains started this morning. They are getting closer together." Caleb was on his feet immediately. "I will ride through the night. I will have her here by morning. Will you be all right until then?" "I will be fine," Sarah said, more confidently than she felt. "First babies take a long time. Just hurry." Caleb kissed her fiercely, grabbed his coat and rifle, and was out the door. Sarah heard his horse gallop away into the gathering dusk. The cabin felt very empty without him. Sarah cleaned up from supper, made sure the fire was built up, and laid out all the supplies they had prepared. Then she walked slowly around the cabin, stopping whenever a contraction hit, breathing through the pain as Mrs. Brennan had taught her. The night stretched out long and dark. The contractions grew stronger, more frequent. Sarah paced, rested, paced again. She talked to the baby, telling it about Caleb, about the mountains, about the life they would have together. Dawn was breaking when she finally heard horses approaching. The cabin door burst open, and Caleb rushed in, followed by Mrs. Brennan carrying her medical bag. "How far apart are the pains?" Mrs. Brennan asked, immediately taking charge. "About 3 minutes," Sarah gasped as another contraction hit. "Good. Let's get you to bed. This baby will be here before noon if I am any judge." Mrs. Brennan was right. By mid-morning, Sarah was fully into active labor, the contractions coming one on top of another. Caleb held her hand, let her squeeze until his fingers turned white, wiped her face with cool water, and murmured constant encouragement. "You are so strong," he told her. "You can do this. Just a little longer." "I cannot," Sarah sobbed during one particularly brutal contraction. "I cannot do this." "Yes, you can," Caleb said firmly. "You are the strongest person I know. You survived hell and came out the other side. You can do this too. I am right here with you." Finally, Mrs. Brennan said, "All right, Sarah, next contraction you push. This baby is ready to meet the world." Sarah pushed with everything she had, and pain like nothing she had ever experienced tore through her. she screamed, gripping Caleb's hand hard enough to hurt him. "Again," Mrs. Brennan commanded. "I can see the head. One more big push." Sarah bore down with all her strength, and suddenly the pain crested and broke like a wave. She heard a thin, reedy cry, and Mrs. Brennan was laughing. "It is a boy! You have a son!" Mrs. Brennan laid the squalling baby on Sarah's chest. He was red and wrinkled and covered in blood and vernix, and he was the most beautiful thing Sarah had ever seen. She looked up at Caleb and saw tears streaming down his face. "A son," he whispered. "We have a son." The baby quieted at the sound of their voices, his dark eyes trying to focus. Sarah touched his tiny hand, and his fingers immediately wrapped around hers with surprising strength. "What will you name him?" Mrs. Brennan asked as she worked to finish the delivery. Sarah looked at Caleb. They had discussed names but never settled on one. "Daniel," Caleb said. After Sarah's father, he was a good man, even if he did not understand what she was facing. "Daniel Thorne," Sarah said softly. "Welcome to the world, little one." Mrs. Brennan stayed for 3 days, making sure both Sarah and the baby were healthy and teaching them how to care for a newborn. She showed them how to swaddle him, how to help Sarah nurse, what to watch for in terms of illness or problems. When she finally prepared to leave, Sarah hugged her tight. "Thank you for everything." "You take care of that boy," Mrs. Brennan said, "and take care of each other. If you need me, send word. I do not care what time of year it is or what the weather is like, I will come." After she left, Sarah and Caleb settled into life as parents. It was exhausting and overwhelming and absolutely wonderful. Daniel was a healthy baby with strong lungs and his father's appetite. He nursed enthusiastically and slept in short bursts, leaving Sarah perpetually tired. Caleb was a hands-on father, changing diapers, walking the floor with Daniel when he fussed, singing him the same songs his mother had once sung to him. Watching this large, fierce man cradle his tiny son with such gentleness made Sarah fall even more deeply in love with him. The seasons turned. Daniel grew from a tiny infant into a plump baby who smiled and cooed. His eyes, which had been dark at birth, turned pale blue like his father's. His hair came in dark and thick. When Daniel was 6 months old, Sarah woke one morning to the sound of voices outside. Her heart leapt into her throat. Caleb was already awake, rifle in hand, peering out the window. "It is Mrs. Brennan," he said, surprised, "and she has someone with her." They went to the door together. Mrs. Brennan stood on the porch, and beside her was a man in a suit carrying a leather satchel. "Good morning," Mrs. Brennan said. "I hope you do not mind the intrusion. I brought someone I think you need to meet. This is Judge Harrington. He is a circuit judge, and he has something to tell you." The judge stepped forward. He was an older man with kind eyes and graying hair. "Mr. Thorne, Mrs. Mitchell, or should I say Mrs. Thorne, I have some news that I think will be of interest to you." Sarah's arms tightened around Daniel. "What kind of news?" "Thomas Mitchell is dead," the judge said bluntly. "He was killed 3 months ago in a fight at a saloon in Durango. The man who killed him claimed self-defense, said Thomas attacked him without provocation. Given Thomas's reputation, which had been deteriorating steadily, the jury believed him. He was acquitted." Sarah swayed and Caleb caught her arm. "Thomas is dead?" "Yes, madam, which means you are a widow, free and clear. There are no more legal claims on you." He pulled papers from his satchel. "I took the liberty of drawing up a death certificate and a certificate of widowhood. Once you sign these, you are legally free to remarry if you so choose." "But I already am married," Sarah said, looking at Caleb. "In your hearts, perhaps," Judge Harrington said, "but not in the eyes of the law. If you want to make it legal, I can perform a ceremony right here and now. Mrs. Brennan can serve as witness." Sarah and Caleb looked at each other. They had been married in their hearts for over a year now, had built a life together, had a child together. But to have it recognized by law, to know that no one could ever try to separate them again, that was something precious. "Yes," Sarah said, "please." They stood on the porch of the cabin with Daniel in Sarah's arms. Judge Harrington spoke the traditional words, and Sarah and Caleb repeated their vows. This time, the words were almost identical to what they had said to each other that winter night by the fire. But now they were backed by the full weight of the law. By the power vested in me by the territory of Colorado, I now pronounce you husband and wife, Judge Harrington said. Mr. Thorne, you may kiss your bride. Caleb did, long and deep, while Mrs. Brennan and the judge tactfully looked away. The judge filed the marriage certificate and gave them copies of all the paperwork. You are free now, he said, both of you. You can come down to town if you want, file for a homestead claim on this land, live your lives without looking over your shoulders. But Sarah shook her head. This is our home. We do not need anything from civilization. We have everything we need right here. The judge nodded as if he had expected that answer. Then I wish you both very happy. You have a beautiful family. After the judge and Mrs. Brennan left, Sarah and Caleb stood in the porch, watching them ride away. Daniel babbled happily in Sarah's arms, grabbing at her hair. We are really married, Sarah said wonderingly. Legally married. We were always really married, Caleb said, pulling her close. The piece of paper just makes it official. That night, after Daniel was asleep in his cradle, Sarah and Caleb lay tangled together in their bed. Are you happy? Caleb asked softly. I did not know it was possible to be this happy, Sarah replied. A year and a half ago I was running for my life, terrified and alone. Now I have you and Daniel and this life in the mountains. It is more than I ever dreamed possible. You saved me too, you know, Caleb said. I was just existing before you came, going through the motions, surviving but not really living. You gave me a reason to care about tomorrow. You taught me that not all people hurt each other, that love can be gentle and kind. We saved each other, Sarah said, kissing him softly. The years that followed were good ones. Daniel grew into a sturdy, adventurous little boy who followed his father everywhere, learning to track and hunt and survive in the wilderness. When he was 3, Sarah gave birth to a daughter they named Clara, after Caleb's mother. 2 years later, another son arrived, whom they called James. The cabin was full of noise and laughter and life. Sarah taught the children to read and write, telling them stories and singing songs. Caleb taught them practical skills, how to respect the wilderness and live in harmony with it. They occasionally went to Silverton for supplies, no longer hiding but walking openly through town. Some people whispered about Sarah, about how she had run away from her husband and lived in sin with the mountain man. But most people saw a family, happy and thriving, and left them alone. Mrs. Brennan became a regular visitor, bringing news from the outside world and checking on the children. She was there when Clara was born, and again when James arrived. She became like a grandmother to the children, who adored her. When Daniel was 10, Sarah and Caleb were sitting on the porch one evening after the children had gone to bed. The stars were brilliant overhead, and the air was cool and sweet with the scent of pine. Do you ever regret it? Caleb asked suddenly. Giving up civilization? You could have had a house in town, neighbors, a church community. Sarah took his hand. I gave up nothing. I gained everything. In town, I would have been Thomas Mitchell's widow, defined by my relationship to a cruel man. Here, I am just Sarah Thorne, wife and mother and woman who survived. I have a partner who respects me, children who are growing up knowing that love does not hurt, and freedom to be myself. What could I possibly regret? Caleb smiled and pulled her close. I love you, Sarah Thorne. I love you too, Caleb Thorne. Always and forever. The years continued to turn. The children grew tall and strong, learning the lessons their parents taught. Daniel became an expert tracker like his father, able to read the mountains like a book. Clara was quiet and thoughtful, with a gift for healing. She learned everything she could from Mrs. Brennan, who visited less frequently now as age slowed her down. James was the wild one, always exploring, always asking questions, always pushing boundaries. When Sarah was 35 and Caleb was 40, they welcomed their 4th and final child, a daughter they named Grace. She was a surprise, born 12 years after James, and she was doted on by her older siblings. By the time Grace was 5, Daniel was 20 and had built his own cabin a mile away, where he lived with the young woman he had fallen in love with during trips to town. Clara was 17 and apprenticing with the new doctor in Silverton, coming home on weekends to share everything she was learning. James, at 15, was already talking about exploring beyond the mountains, seeing what lay farther west. Sarah watched her children grow and thrive with a sense of deep satisfaction. They were strong and capable and kind, raised without violence or cruelty. They knew how to survive in the wilderness, but they also knew how to read and write and think. They had choices, opportunities, futures. One evening, after Grace had been put to bed and the cabin was quiet, Sarah and Caleb sat by the fire as they had done countless times over the years. "Do you remember the night I arrived here?" Sarah asked, "bruised and terrified, running from a posse?" "I remember thinking you were the bravest person I had ever met," Caleb said, "and the most beautiful, even with dirt on your face and torn clothes. You saved my life that night." "We saved each other," Caleb corrected, echoing what Sarah had said years ago. "I was only half alive before you came. You made me whole." Sarah leaned her head on his shoulder. "The posse shouted that I was running away from a good, honest husband. They believed it too. They thought Thomas was the victim." "But you knew the truth," Caleb said, "and you were brave enough to run, even when the whole world said you should stay. That took more courage than anything I have ever done. I could not have survived without you. When you saw my bruises, you did not look away. You did not make excuses for Thomas or tell me I should try harder to be a good wife. You just saw me, and you helped." Caleb turned to look at her, his pale blue eyes soft in the firelight. Even at 40, he was still powerfully built, his hair now streaked with silver. "I will always see you, Sarah, and I will always help. That is what love is." They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the fire burn down to embers. Outside, the mountains stood eternal under a sky full of stars. Somewhere in the darkness, an owl called. The world turned, seasons changed, but some things remained constant. Love remained constant, safety remained constant, home remained constant. Sarah had run away from a monster, and she had found a man, not just any man, but one who understood that strength was not about domination, but about protection. One who knew that love was not about ownership, but about partnership. One who had taken a broken, terrified woman and helped her become whole again. And she had given him just as much. She had brought warmth and life into his lonely cabin. She had taught him that trust was possible, that opening your heart did not mean it would be broken. She had given him a family, a purpose, a reason to believe in goodness again. Together, they had built something beautiful from the wreckage of Sarah's past. They had created a home filled with love and laughter, raised children who knew kindness and respect, and proved that even the darkest beginning could lead to the brightest future. As Sarah drifted off to sleep that night, safe in Caleb's arms, she thought about the girl she had been, the one who had stumbled into Silverton with terror in her eyes and bruises hidden beneath her sleeves. That girl had been so afraid, so broken, so convinced that the only escape was death. But she had been wrong. The escape had been life, real life, full of joy and pain and work and love, life with a man who cherished her, children who thrived, and a home that was truly a sanctuary. The posse had shouted that she was running from a good, honest husband, but the mountain man had seen the truth in her sad, dark bruises, and in seeing, in believing, in protecting her, he had given her the greatest gift of all. He had given her a future. And what a beautiful future it had turned out to be. Years continued to pass with the gentle rhythm of mountain life. Sarah and Caleb grew older together, their love deepening with each passing season. When Sarah turned 40, Caleb surprised her with a gift, a small music box he had ordered from Denver. It played a soft melody, and inside he had inscribed the words, "To my brave Sarah, who taught me what love really means." Grace grew into a bright, curious child who loved to explore the woods with her father and learn cooking from her mother. She had Sarah's brown hair and Caleb's blue eyes, and she possessed a fearlessness that sometimes made her parents' hearts stop. Daniel's wife, Emma, gave them their first grandchild when Sarah was 42, a little girl they named Rose. Sarah held her granddaughter and felt the circle of life complete itself in a way she never could have imagined during her dark years with Thomas. Clara became a skilled healer, working alongside the doctor in Silverton, but always maintaining her connection to her mountain home. She brought medicines to isolated families and delivered babies in the backcountry, carrying on Mrs. Brennan's legacy. James did eventually head west, but he always came back. The mountains were in his blood, and after 2 years of wandering, he returned and built a cabin near Daniels. He married a rancher's daughter and started raising horses, supplying the growing demand as more people moved into the territory. Mrs. Brennan passed away peacefully in her sleep when she was 78. The whole family attended her funeral in Silverton, and Sarah spoke about how this brave, compassionate woman had helped bring her children safely into the world and had kept her secret when it mattered most. She understood that laws and morality are not always the same thing, Sarah said at the graveside. She chose to follow her conscience and her calling rather than blindly obey unjust rules. She saved lives, including mine. When Sarah turned 50, Caleb was 55. Their hair was more gray than dark now, and Caleb's face was weathered from decades in the mountain sun. But he was still strong, still capable, and his eyes still lit up whenever Sarah entered a room. They sat on their porch one summer evening, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and purple. Grace, now 15, was inside preparing dinner. The sounds of her singing drifted through the open windows. "We did good," Caleb said quietly. "We did," Sarah agreed. 4 beautiful children, all of them thriving. 3 grandchildren now, with more on the way. A life built on love instead of fear. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if you had not run that day?" Caleb asked. "If you had stayed with Thomas?" Sarah shuddered. "I would be dead. Either he would have killed me outright, or I would have died inside piece by piece until there was nothing left. Running was the hardest thing I ever did, but it was also the bravest. It saved my life." "I am glad you ran," Caleb said, taking her hand. "I am glad you found your way to my cabin. I am glad you let me help you." "I am glad you saw the truth in my bruises," Sarah replied. "So many people looked at them and looked away, or made excuses, or told me I deserved it, but you saw them and you knew. You knew I was telling the truth." Caleb's jaw tightened. Even after all these years, the thought of what Sarah had endured made him angry. "Men like Thomas give all men a bad name. They make people think that strength means cruelty and that love means ownership. I wanted to show you that real strength is about protection. Real love is about freedom." "You did show me," Sarah said softly. "Every single day for 23 years now, you have shown me. You never raised your voice in anger. You never raised your hand. You treated me as an equal partner in all things. You asked for my opinions and listened to my thoughts. You taught our children to respect all people, regardless of gender. You broke the cycle that your father started." "We broke it together," Caleb corrected. "You could have let your experience make you bitter and afraid. Instead, you chose to trust again, to love again. That took tremendous courage." The sun dipped below the horizon, and stars began to emerge in the darkening sky. Grace called from inside that dinner was ready. Sarah and Caleb stood, their movements slower now than in their youth, but still steady and sure. Inside, the cabin glowed with lamplight and warmth. Grace had set the table and prepared a meal of roasted venison, vegetables from their garden, and fresh bread. As they ate, Grace chattered about her day, about the deer she had tracked with her father, about the dress she was sewing, about her dreams for the future. Sarah listened and smiled, her heart full. This was what peace felt like. This was what safety felt like. This was what real love looked like. After dinner, as Sarah was washing dishes and Grace was practicing her reading by lamplight, there was a knock at the door. Caleb opened it to find Clara standing there with her medical bag. "Just stopped by on my way back from the Hendersons' place," she said, coming inside. "Their youngest had croup, but he is doing better now." She hugged her mother and ruffled Grace's hair. "How's everyone here?" "Doing well," Sarah said. "Stay for coffee?" "Always." They sat around the table, 4 generations of family connected through love and resilience. Clara told stories of her patients, Grace asked questions about medicine, and Caleb and Sarah exchanged the comfortable glances of people who had shared a life together. When Clara finally left to ride home in the moonlight, Sarah stood on the porch and watched her daughter disappear into the trees. "I am so proud of them," she said to Caleb. "All of our children, they are good people, doing good things in the world." "They learned from the best," Caleb said, wrapping his arms around her from behind. They learned from a mother who survived hell and came out stronger. They learned from parents who loved each other with respect and devotion. They learned that family is about more than blood. It is about choice and commitment and showing up every day. Sarah leaned back against Caleb's solid strength. "Do you remember what you promised me that first night? You said you would protect me with everything you had and love me for as long as you drew breath." "I remember. You kept that promise. Every single day for 23 years. You kept that promise. You made me feel safe. You made me feel valued. You made me feel loved." "It was the easiest promise I ever made to keep," Caleb said, kissing the top of her head. "Loving you has been the greatest privilege of my life." They stood there together under the stars, wrapped in each other's arms. The mountains rose around them, eternal and protective. An owl called in the darkness, and somewhere in the distance a wolf howled. These were the sounds of their home, familiar and comforting. Sarah thought about the journey that had brought her here, the pain and fear of her marriage to Thomas, the desperate flight through the mountains, the moment she had knocked on a stranger's door and found not just sanctuary but salvation. She thought about the posse that had shouted she was running from a good, honest husband, how wrong they had been, how blind they had been to the truth that was written in her bruises and her desperate eyes. But the mountain man had seen. Caleb had looked past the social conventions and the legal definitions and had seen a woman in desperate need. He had made the choice to help her, to hide her, to love her, even though it could have cost him everything. And in doing so, he had given her everything. A life worth living, a love worth cherishing, a future worth believing in. Sarah turned in Caleb's arms and looked up at him. Even in the darkness, she could see the pale blue of his eyes, the strong lines of his face, the gray in his hair. He was 55 years old now, weathered and scarred by a life in the wilderness, but to her, he was the most beautiful man in the world. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For seeing me, for believing me, for loving me, for giving me a life I never dreamed was possible." Caleb cupped her face in his large, gentle hands. "Thank you for being brave enough to run. Thank you for trusting me. Thank you for building this life with me. Thank you for our children and our grandchildren and every single day we have had together." They kissed there under the stars, a kiss that held 23 years of love and devotion and partnership. When they finally pulled apart, they were both smiling. "Come on," Caleb said, taking her hand. "Let's go inside. Grace probably has the fire banked by now, and I want to hold you in our bed, in our home, and count myself the luckiest man who ever lived." Sarah let him lead her inside, into the warmth and light of the cabin they had built together. This was home. Not just the physical structure of logs and stone, but the feeling of safety and love that filled every corner. This was what she had been running toward that desperate day when she fled Thomas. Not just away from violence and pain, but toward something better, toward love and partnership and respect, toward a man who would see her bruises and believe her story, toward a life where she could be herself, strong and capable and cherished. The posse had shouted that she was running from a good, honest husband. They had been so certain in their righteousness, so convinced they were doing the right thing by trying to return her to Thomas. But they had been wrong. Thomas had never been good or honest. He had been a monster wearing a respectable face, a man who thought ownership was the same as love. And the mountain man, the hermit who lived outside civilization, had been more civilized than any of them. He had understood what they could not, that a woman was not property, that marriage did not give a man the right to hurt, that sometimes the bravest thing a person could do was run. Caleb had seen her sad, dark bruises and had known the truth. In that moment of recognition, of belief, of validation, Sarah's new life had begun. And what a beautiful life it had been. As Sarah settled into bed that night, Caleb's arm around her waist, she sent up a silent prayer of gratitude. Gratitude for the strength to run. Gratitude for the mountain that had hidden her. Gratitude for the man who had saved her and loved her and given her a life beyond her wildest dreams. The years ahead would bring their own joys and sorrows. More grandchildren would be born. Sarah and Caleb would grow older still, their bodies slowing, but their love never diminishing. Eventually, as all people must, they would face the end of their time together. But that was in the future. For now, there was this moment, this perfect, peaceful moment in a mountain cabin, surrounded by love and safety and all the possibilities of tomorrow. Sarah closed her eyes and let sleep claim her, secure in the knowledge that she was exactly where she belonged, in the arms of a man who had proven every single day that real love did not hurt. Real love protected. Real love cherished. Real love set you free. The posse had shouted their accusations, certain in their righteousness, but the mountain man had seen the truth, and in seeing, believing, and acting on that truth, he had given Sarah Mitchell the greatest gift of all. He had given her a life worth living, and she had given him the same. Together, they had built something beautiful from the ashes of Sarah's pain, a family, a home, a love story that would be passed down through generations, a testament to the power of courage, compassion, and the unshakable belief that every person deserves to be treated with dignity and respect. As the fire burned low and the mountain night settled around the cabin, Sarah and Caleb slept peacefully, their hands intertwined, their hearts beating in rhythm. Outside, the mountains stood watch, ancient and protective, guarding the family that had made this wild place their home. And in the morning, they would wake to a new day, full of new possibilities, secure in the knowledge that whatever challenges came, they would face them together. Just as they always had. Just as they always would. Forever and always, until the end of their days and beyond, into the stories their children and grandchildren would tell. The story of a woman who ran from cruelty and found love. The story of a man who lived alone and found family. The story of how two broken people came together and made each other whole. It was a story worth telling, a story worth remembering, a story that proved that even in the darkest times, hope survives, love endures, and courage, real courage, can change everything. The posse had shouted their lies, but the mountain man had seen the truth in her sad, dark bruises. And in that moment of seeing, of truly seeing, everything had changed. Sarah had found her home, Caleb had found his purpose, and together they had found forever. It was, in every way that mattered, a perfect ending and an even better beginning.